Hey guys, Paco here. Like, comment, subscribe on your way in. Let's get into the video. We're back with another video from Bellular News about CEO telling people to be quiet.
Okay, today's story's got it all, but to start it off, I have to open with this quote. So here goes. Yes, to not disrupt company operations, some payments may be scheduled in a way that works for the company's cash flow, not always for everyone individually. That's the reality of the world we live in. It must be great being a video games executive. The world lets you choose not to pay staff on time, and according to some allegations, for up to 6 months. And then,
hell
when
no.
they call you out and the media picks up on the story, you can go to Twitter and boast about how utterly successful you are and how important your game is, how your game defines the Web3 space. Because yes, of course, this story is actually about Web3 and NFTs as well. And even how the, quote,
Really? NFTs are back?
trying to find new reasons for you to fail. And to truly give us a taste of today's subject's character, while all of this was going down, the official account for their game, Off the Grid, posted a skin of a character wielding a keyboard with the tasteful caption, "Shout out to every keyboard warrior who's never played OTG, but won't stop talking about it." Right, some context may
The hell is
required.
OTG?
So we're talking about Gunzilla Games. Gunzilla Games is the developer and publisher behind Off the Grid. It's the game that bills itself as, quote, the world's first free-to-play extraction royale with narrative cinematics from director Neil Blomkamp. Yeah, that one. District 9. He's also a co-founder of the company, by the way. This game has been on all consoles and PC since October 2024, but it only came to Steam July 2025. And that's because it features a blockchain marketplace that lets users trade items as NFTs. Now, the Steam version of the game doesn't seem to have the marketplace directly integrated, despite, of course, it earning Gunzilla millions in funding as, big old Web3 project. So, Steam player numbers, which likely are being buoyed at least a little bit by bots, are averaging more than 10,000 players a day, and that's on Steam alone. So, look, it's not like this game itself is an abject failure. You just may not have heard about it, just like you may not have heard of loads of live service games that are actually managing to survive based on their numbers, just that their numbers aren't really big enough to be newsworthy. But now, well, it turns out that Gunzilla
I never heard of this game.
is surviving on the strength of their players and associated economic activity alone, because they've discovered one simple trick to keeping your operating costs down. And that trick is, just don't pay your staff on time. Now, this all kicked off because former senior animator Paul Creamer revealed on LinkedIn that...
Where is this company located? They're definitely not located in the US, because if they were located in the US, there would be labor board violations, the government would be involved, there would be a lot of outcry. Can't imagine this studio is located in the United States.
He had not been paid since October 2025, with allegations that other people in the company actually hadn't been paid for longer. He claims that upper management told him, quote, "These delays were temporary and growing pains tied to being a new company with a new game." But then, according to Mr. Creamer, the CEO, Vlad Korolev, reached out to the team in December. And here's what was said. Invoices would be paid as soon as possible. The company was actually profitable, and that they, the staff, were doing the right thing by keeping quiet and continuing to work. Because
Hell
hey,
no,
the
speak
company
out.
itself is working, so you guys just keep quiet, and because the company is working, we'll eventually have money to pay you with. So, don't kick up a fuss or do anything that could interrupt the company, and we'll just keep on not paying you. Kind of feels a bit like that, right? Now, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that Mr. Creamer does not believe that the good CEO was being truthful, and staff have actually stopped keeping quiet in this. Insider Gamers pulled together more examples of staff taking to LinkedIn to highlight exactly how far back this goes, with people who are still at the company suggesting that they're still not being paid, and that this has been the case for some people since last September, which is quite brutal. Now, GameIndustry.biz went deeper in this, and they found that it seems to break down geographically across the company's 4 offices. Ukrainian staff are alleging anywhere between 4 and 6 months of unpaid work, but then there are international contractors who haven't been paid since October, and German staff, well, apparently are having the best deal because they're only missing their March payments, and then there's the UK staff staff who have otherwise been, quote, periodically paid late, with pension contributions missing on occasion last year and now missing entirely since November. Now, we're not talking about just a little late invoice here. This is major. Some of these people have been working for months upon months without being paid at all. Now, some senior staff, like their talent acquisition lead, seem to have had their problems, quote, resolved after the complaints went viral. But the timing of all this suggests that Gunzilla isn't exactly on the best footing. You see, the first mispayment came a month after they had layoffs, which were in July. And those were layoffs that had followed another round that went down just 3 months earlier. And what makes this a bit more complex is that last year Gunzilla made a bit of a name for themselves by buying the remains of Game Informer. Yes, Game Informer, the thing that was a big cultural institution in America, right? It was really, really big over there. So they bought Game Informer, they rehired many of the Game Informer staff, and they relaunched the outlet. And the thing is that by all accounts, Game Informer seems to be going perfectly well. Of course, they can lean on the scale and the prestige that the name Game Informer carries. But with staff and the development side of things obviously suffering, it feels like things aren't really going great across the board here. But you know what? There's a guy who disagrees, and he is Vlad Korolev. As is becoming a pattern with Vlad, I'm going to start this off with a quote. Today, there is a new narrative from haters. So it's always good then when the leader of a company, one worth tens of millions of dollars, is talking about the haters. So what's happened is that Gunzilla CEO Vlad Korolev took to Twitter to respond to the allegations and the press attention that he claims comes from, quote, people who've never played OTG and have never built a business who are sitting and spreading FUD to farm a few views. And FUD, by the way, stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I mean, it is a thing, sometimes in a business context, though very often people
Hold on, I want to go back. Game that represents not only itself, but the entire Web3 gaming industry in front of traditional gaming. We will keep building for the millions of players who actually love our product. Again, I never tried this game. I don't know if it's good or not. We are deeply grateful for that support. Many choose to show it by becoming paid OTG Pro subscribers. 100K users signed in 2025 alone. So if you're having all this money come in, why are you not paying your staff? I know they're paying it in Germany and the UK because they're going to face massive government backlash and basically be sued out the ass if they're not paying it. Ukraine, though, they're in the middle of a war. The last thing they're going to do is try to file a lawsuit.
And doubt. I mean, it is a thing, sometimes in a business context, though very often people in the crypto space will basically just say, this is just the hater spreading FUD, even if the FUD is legitimate concerns. I think the concerns today are fairly legitimate. But no, it actually has to be FUD, and we're all just spreading bullshit, because the game, Off the Grid, is in fact the biggest Web3 game ever made, with 100,000 pro subscribers in 2025 and 3,000 players joining every day, with industry record day one retention, at least according to Korolev. And to really throw down the gauntlet, he's even willing to give all of us FUD spreaders access to all of his data to actually prove it, only if we cough up 100,000 gun. Now you might be wondering, what is a gun? Never mind 100,000 of them. Well, the answer is Gun is the company's cryptocurrency, and at current rates, 100,000 of it would be about $1,500. So there you go, he's happy to prove to everyone how well his game's doing, but you'll need to drop a $1,500 to get the data. So I guess we can glean from this that the game is doing exceptionally well. And hey, to his credit, Korolev does attribute this success to his staff's hard work. He claims this success has came from 400 people working for 6 years where, quote, there's never been a single day where anyone worked in a work-life balance mode. Now look, I can understand the virtues of being a scrappy bunch of people, you know, in the trenches with each other. Sure, whatever, but I do think this is probably just a shitload of crunching, which really doesn't hit well when the reason why we're talking about all of this stuff, you know, is staff not being paid for like half a year in some cases. And apparently these staff aren't being paid, even though Korolev explains that, quote, Off the Grid today is not just part of Web3 gaming, it defines it, whether or not some people like it or not. Being named Web3 Game of the Year 2 years in a row. So, the new narrative then is that, quote, Gunzilla incorrectly laid off contractors or paid them with delays, which he then tacitly confirms as actually being the case. You see, the layoffs, in that wonderfully corporate speak way, are framed as, quote, optimizing costs, which has been happening for, quote, over a year, just like with many other companies. But then we get to the quote that's about scheduling payments, that
Yeah, a lot of the publishers and developers have been laying off staff the last year or two. The whole COVID-19 pandemic, when everybody was at home, that increased the sales of video games and the production side. Same thing with tech companies. During COVID, for the end of 2020, all of 2021, and most of 2022, there was a whole skyrocketing in demand of at home entertainment, video games, movies, because everybody was stuck at home. They needed something to do so they didn't go freaking insane. But now that everybody's back outside, they've been back outside for the last 2-3 years. There's a decrease in the tech space, there's a decrease in video games and entertainment again. It's kind of normalizing out to what it was roughly pre-COVID. Now, all these companies are beginning to see that they have too much staff. They're spending too much money in certain areas, and they're not profitable enough to maintain that. So layoffs are going to happen.
some people will be paid when it suits Gunzilla, not necessarily the needs of those people or even their expectations, perhaps based on a contract they signed. Here's the quote. But to protect the interests of our players and our full-time official employees, whose salaries over 6 years have never been delayed by more than a week, we operate at a pace that ensures the company continues moving forward. And of course, we honor every obligation. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused. So, effectively in saying that, he actually corroborates many of people's claims, and he confirms that some staff have now actually been paid, but obviously they've only been paid after they went and raised complaints publicly. But from the way that he tells it, all of this, it's just detail. And what it actually is just a part of how you make a truly successful game. But sometimes you just have to act this way. You know, I'm almost getting a little whiff of whenever, like, say, one of those sovereign citizen people decides to defend themselves in court without a lawyer and just ends up making a big tit out of themselves. This is a story where there should have been some PR people saying, please don't say that, you're going to cause the company a lot of bother. But hey, it does at least make our job easy, doesn't it? Now, would Gunzilla have paid off all of these accrued debts if they hadn't seen all of this media attention? Maybe.
Probably not.
We don't know, though, because this is what has happened. We can't prove another timeline, right? But I'll say that the way Karlev talks about scheduling payments so as to, quote, not disrupt company operations, well, that does suggest that the company is doing something that a lot of companies actually do. And that is spinning plates, trying to make the money work, and one where they're happy to let a few plates wobble whenever management believes they need to. And that means that contractors and Ukrainian staff end up taking the hit, and maybe not having their dinner plate full because, hey, the company let the plate wobble. And I guess all that done to keep the UK and German staff solvent, the game running, and the company running. And remember, this is a company that found the money to acquire Game Informer and relaunch an entire media outlet while the contractors we're talking about in today's story went unpaid. So that's not a company that's like in insolvency. It's just quite simply prioritization that doesn't give a shit about certain people, the people who took to LinkedIn to talk about their experience. So when we think about this, is it a coincidence that, say, complaints from the contractors or the people in Ukraine, that maybe those aren't the groups of people as likely to break through to bigger media audiences? Maybe, say, the UK and German staff would have more immediate recourse if there was serious issues with pay not being given out, right? I mean, in the UK and Germany, that's like high priority legal stuff you need to get right. So, you know, if it means sacrificing a bunch of contractors and literally not paying them to work and telling them to, keep it down and don't speak up, seems like some people are being put to the bottom of the totem pole and not being prioritized. And that does seem like a company that's running itself in a very bizarre way indeed. Or perhaps not bizarre, perhaps it's the likely thing. A calculation to keep Gunzilla operating with the least risk. possible. Despite their money and any distaste you might have towards NFTs, Gunzilla is still an independent game developer, and what defines an indie dev more than anything else is their ability to keep the lights on, right? Like, generally, the thing that lets you be independent is, like, how you get money and how, for whatever reason, you don't need to get that money from a super big publisher. Now, because of that, most choose to keep the lights on by simply operating at a far smaller scale, right? Certainly a far smaller scale than today's game, off the grid. Often indies will be chasing government grants or publisher advances, doing a bit of wheeling and dealing to stay afloat. But the difference between most indie devs and Gunzilla in this story is who ends up shouldering the company's problems. You see, Gunzilla's management clearly believes in their project, and they'll even publicly praise their staff for delivering on the goals of that project, which is a great thing. But evidently, whenever the finances need to be balanced, staff do appear to be asked to sacrifice their pay for the good of the project. That kind of thing goes on more than most people would know, and the only reason we know about it today is because enough of those people stopped keeping quiet and actually spoke up about what was going on. It's one of those stories we felt we had to cover because of just how, goofy, how weird, how out of touch and bizarre the company's responses to this have been. Though, if you're looking for a story that will perhaps impact your
I see Gunzilla getting away with this for a little bit longer, maybe another year or two at most, then something's going to happen. They're going to come crashing down. This off the grid game is going to end up being closed. They're going to be sued. It's not going to turn out good for Gunzilla in the end. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe to help support the channel, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.